What is going on, everyone? Snoo here. This is a pre-launch 0.3 Act 1 leveling walkthrough video featuring Whirling Slash Twister on a Ranger. Now, a lot of you have been asking me questions about this, why I've elected to level as Whirling Slash Twister, whether I'm planning to go Monk or Ranger or Huntress or anything like that, and I've pretty well made up my mind on it. I really enjoy this build. I like having a little bit of extra things to do, especially when the combat pacing is as slow as it is in the early game. Of course, I want to go crazy fast and blast maps later on, and this Twister build can definitely do that. It certainly did in 0.2. It wasn't really nerfed in any way. In fact, if anything, it was buffed, improvements to quality of life. But, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, just to give you a snippet of what it looks like at the very end stages, if you were to play Twister at the very end, this is what it looks like. This was my final character in 0.2. So this should also give a little bit of credence. I probably know what I'm talking about when it comes to Whirling Slash Twister. I played it for a long time in 0.2. I know it beginning, middle, and end. Super crazy strong. Map blaster. Excellent at bossing. This is an accuracy stacker. It's a little weak on defenses, but maybe the deflection mechanic will turn things around a little there. Anyway, back to the early stuff. It's pretty insane to think that the build you just saw has such humble beginnings as this, where yes, there's a lot more methodology involved, there's a lot more situational awareness, it's not a one-button build, you got to press a few things, but as you can see, you can get quite a bit of fulfillment out of knowing what's going on and getting those twisters to work in your favor and just absolutely make a complete mockery of the content. Again, such a high ceiling of damage, it's absolutely ridiculous. Just look what happens to these bosses when you position them the way that you're seeing right here. One last thing I'd like to mention is about Whirling Slash Twister and how fast it is, even as early as Act 1. So I think this definitely gets overlooked because it's so heavily associated with endgame accuracy, stacking, movement speed, that whole thing. But in fact, you can animation cancel out of it. I think it's going to work really well with a brand new sprint mechanic because generally speaking, with this particular leveling build, you're either moving from point A to B, kind of ignoring everything, or there's a big enough pile of monsters around, you stop what you're doing, you just blow up the entire screen real quick. And so I think that's going to play into the favor of this build, as opposed to, something like a bow build that it gets its efficiency from being able to constantly attack and move, and it's very good at doing that. I'm sure the sprint mechanic is probably going to be the kind of thing that raises all boats, but that remains to be seen. I don't know exactly how well it'll be liked. I don't know if it's going to be a bit of a burden with the knockdown. We'll have to wait and see. Here is a brief little section of the video where I'm just going to put in front of you all the gems to be cut in Act 1 in order as they appear. You can pause the video, do a slow-mo or whatever. As you see them appear, that is the gem cutting order. That's going to give you arguably the highest performance of the build in Act 1. Then we also have the passive points. So here's the passive point order real quick in TLDR fashion. And this would apply to Ranger or Huntress, basically. I think there's almost no changes to Huntress. And then I have talked about running Monk. As many of you have been informed, I'm wanting to do Hollow Palm, so I'm still thinking about leveling as Monk, and I did practice leveling as Monk. Here is the order of passives that I would do if I was doing Monk instead. And the reason why I'm not necessarily doing Monk, you'll just have to wait for a future video. But suffice it to say, nobody's running Hollow Palm in Act 1 because it still takes X amount of points to get over there. I think it's a good idea to actually do a true leveling build and not just try to beeline for the Hollow Palm Keystone, wherever it's going to be, because it's important for you to get as much damage as you can out of the build early, and then later on you can respec for a very cheap price anyway. Just save a little bit of gold. It'll be much smarter to do that. So I just want to remind everybody that it's going to be a lot smarter to actually play a real leveling build and then all at once do a hard swap to Hollow Palm, whether you're playing Monk or Deadeye or anything else. Just so you guys know, at the time of recording this, we still don't have the full release skill gems, support gems, or the new passive skill tree overhaul with all the new notables. Now, all that stuff's probably not going to affect an Act 1 league start scenario compared to what you see here in this walkthrough, but I'm just letting you know because it is my intention to come out with a full-blown build guide for this build. I definitely have it up here in my head, but it'd be nice if we had an updated Path of Building 2 and all the components with that, so I'm kind of holding out until last minute like just about everybody else is. Be on the lookout for the description of this video to see a link to a build guide, or just, sub to the channel so you actually see it coming. There will probably be some more videos coming out about all this. Well, that just about wraps up the intro. Not much else to say other than thanks for watching. Hopefully you get something out of this, whether you are kind of newer, just wanting to sink your teeth into a nice narrated walkthrough, or if you are legitimately contemplating running Twister or Whirling Slash and want to practice it, want to hear about it, want to see it. There you go. Let me know if you have any questions or comments in the comment section of the video. Are you thinking about playing Whirling Slash Twister? Are you thinking about doing Hollow Palm, Monk, Deadeye, Ranger? Let us know. Enjoy the video. For Whirling Slash and Twister, the choice between mouse and WASD is actually a pretty big one. For the mouse setup, you will not be able to use Whirling Slash unless your mouse cursor is positioned in a very specific place around your character. It's much more sensitive. Whereas with WASD, you will always cast it and always be able to move laterally. However, you'll lose the function of just running. In both cases, you're basically playing in mouse mode, though. Even though the Huntress is the de facto spear class, any class can play Whirling Slash and Twisters as early as the second zone in Act 1. Both of those skill gems are level 1. In the case of the Ranger, she has a very strong start with projectile damage as opposed to % attack damage, almost as good for Whirling Slash and Twister. Most of our damage comes from Twister anyway. I happen to get some really nice gloves with flat damage, so a little bit lucky there. No spear drop, that would have been really nice. In this case, my goal here is to purchase a spear for 33 gold minimum with 0 modifiers off of Renly. Usually he offers that. In some cases he offers spears for a higher price only with modifiers, and that's what happened to me. So a bit of an awkward start. I would suggest most people in this case just continue playing Lightning Arrow for another zone or two. In my case, I tried something a little bit foolish, and I wanted to play with a quarterstaff I dropped, which did come with a nice roll. Basic attack quarterstaff. I guess that's just the monk in me. In this zone, there are 4 things to find. The mysterious campsite is the main one. That gives you the second level 1 skill gem. And this would unlock Twister if I already had the spear. The others are the mini-boss with 10% cold resistance, as well as a few items, and the other 2 zones. Unfortunately, I'm not showcasing Twister here. It would have been nice, but basically just fight her the same way you would fight any other boss. Later on, you'll see. And that's the waypoint for the Mud Burrow, taking the checkpoint back to Grelwood. I'll start there. This is what I usually do, and it's pretty good with Twister, except remember I don't have it yet. So, we're about to see the first and only death of this run. I foolishly thought I could take my basic quarterstaff attacks, not even Falling Thunder equipped, and ran straight into wisped magic monsters. It did not go well. So, with my tail between my legs, I decided to port back to town, make that spear purchase, even though it's not a very good spear, and a little bit more expensive. I knew I'd have enough gold to do it now. I'm going to go ahead and keep the staff, because Frozen Locust will be the next skill gem to get, and it requires a staff, so don't want to accidentally do that without the proper weapon. And we're now well on our way to a legit Twister Act 1 start. You can actually move rather quickly with Whirling Slash and Dodge Roll Animation Cancel. In case you didn't know, Whirling Slash has a heightened lateral movement initially, especially when the attack speed's still slow. And then when the skill finishes, it sort of jock stops your character in place, and you're kind of just stuck there. But you can cancel out of it with a dodge roll and get some extra lateral movement. You can actually move faster than anyone else in the game at this point, if I'm not mistaken. We found the waypoint very quickly. I'm going to go ahead and search for the hut here. There are 4 different zones to find. We're going to kill the witch early on, get the waypoint there, and then we got the red veil off to the side, and then the other zone that's a little hard to find that's located somewhere in the middle. Our first case of elemental twisters, wouldn't normally have them yet, but one of the upsides to running this build is you get to borrow the power of the enemies, in some cases that they are using elemental ground. I don't actually like doing this boss. He drops a level 2, or a skill gem level 2. It's not really that useful, not really worth the time. I apparently decided to take the scenic route all the way around the zone, still missing one of the important zones to find, but that's me leveling to level 4, usually just level 3 now, before fighting the witch, which we're about to see. But I want to bring your attention to this point right here. You'll see me do this sort of thing a lot, manipulating the terrain to do way more damage than the skill is balanced for. Even this early on in the campaign, you can absolutely delete rares and mini bosses doing that sort of thing. It's one of my favorite things about Twister, especially early on in the campaign. And the perfect example of this is the little hut right here, where most people normally don't fight the witch in the hut because it's way too dangerous. But I'm even more dangerous than she is in there, so it seems worth it to me. Not the end of the world if you die right here anyway. Twisters will bounce back and forth off the wall and be able to hit her multiple times per path. Usually they only have a chance to hit once, maybe twice. But there you can see that's a lot of damage, and that's not the best of it at all. I decided to go ahead and finish her off outside. That's our first deterministic support gem. Also got a rune, which is a really rare drop this early. First support gem goes for Martial Tempo in Whirling Slash. That will allow us to move laterally even more quickly than we were already. I recommend the Devourer questline for this build. We are using 2 skills in one, so it's nice when you can get that extra skill gem and support gem, as we still don't have a single support gem for the main damage skill. Another cool thing about Twister is the layouts that most people hate, i.e. these sort of cavern or dungeon style layouts, are excellent for Twister. They lock the Twisters up and you can use the terrain to your advantage. The Devourer fight is a pretty easy one because he has such a big hitbox. It's a massive advantage for Twister as they are an area of effect projectile passing over. You'll always want to make sure you're positioning your Twisters going in parallel into the wall. That's where you're going to maximize damage. Even on a big arena, you can still do alright. Smaller arenas are the best of all. I forgot to mention this, but Whirling Slash, you definitely want to get all 3 cast out. You don't want to accidentally cast it with 0, 1, or 2. Otherwise, when you're continuing to Whirling Slash, it will eat up Twisters that were not already fully empowered. And that's a problem, because then it's going to take you longer to actually get your real cast off. The Twisters have a count of 4 if it's maximum 3 Whirling Slash, and they do the most damage that way. This gives us our next uncut skill gem that will go towards Frozen Locust, which we need a quarterstaff for. And this is usually the first trip back to town, where I go back and I make the trades, I empty my inventory, get some gold, and then I'm trying to find one or more of the following 3 things from the vendor. I'd say movement speed boots at the very top of the list there, as you can all probably imagine. Also, a weapon upgrade, either in the form of just an improved weapon with flat damage, or gloves with flat damage, or perhaps the next tier of the weapon. And in some cases, you might get lucky and get a rare item, or even a rare weapon. The biggest reason to do the Devourer questline is that you get not only a skill gem, but also a deterministic support gem. This is either the first or second one. And with Martial Tempo and Whirling Slash, now we put Retreat support in Twister. Persistent support will be the following support gem. So we ported back to Grelwood. Next on the list is the Red Veil. However, I decided to hurry up and find the next zone since I still hadn't found it, the Grim Tangle. Gonna go down here and get the waypoint out of the way. The Red Veil is one of my favorite zones early on. It's the first place that has some serious legit monster density. Excellent for Twisters. A lot of trees and terrain to bounce off of. A lot of opportunity to manipulate terrain with Twisters. The 3 objects you have to find can be somewhat infuriating sometimes. But here you go. A first look at Frozen Locust getting the elemental Twisters. It forces me to step back, which is really nice. Repositions me, makes me a little bit safer. Tends to freeze enemies. Once that ice explodes, there is a change coming in 0.3 where that may do less damage, but the most important thing here is the chilled ground. That is not going away as far as I know. And so the timing of the attack and what you're seeing here, just keep in mind, this looks a lot more clunky than it's going to be because I'm suffering the full brunt of weapon swap delay here right before that change in 0.3. Continuing to level up, just taking the points along the line. It's just projectile damage and attack speed so far. This zone has a lot of weapon racks, so a great place to find the next tier of spear. In fact, I mean, it's really well timed with the next spear tier dropping in this zone. If you have a transmutation orb especially, you can get a pretty big upgrade. There it is, Iron Head Spear. That's the one. As fun as Twister is, just for clear and trash, I gotta say the most enjoyable part of it is bosses or mini-bosses. So we'll see here, I'm deliberately positioning this boss into the crevice up top. It doesn't seem like a terribly abusive position, but it does allow me to do quite a bit of extra damage just by forcing those twisters into that area. It would be best if I had them a little bit closer to that wall. But you can see it's performing very, very well right here. We got our 4th skill gem here. This could be for Twister rank 3, from rank 1 to 3, but I like to use Disengage as part of the rotation lateral movement, and it does help me get out of trouble. Disengage probably won't be as important coming 0.3 as it is right now in the current state of the game because of Sprint. Now remember, I had dropped one of those Ironhead spears off the ground, was planning to transmute, augment it, but I got a pretty lucky drop here from the boss. Not a super well rolled spear, to be honest, but it's better than the magic one probably would have turned out. Best stats are flat damage and attack speed as a suffix. Alright, gotta port back to this area to knock out the seals, progress the quest line, and we'll be off to the Grim Tangle next. There's a couple points in the campaign where you're having to wait for NPCs to go through a certain process. I realized this recently, that you can respawn a checkpoint after initiating that part of the quest and respawn immediately without having to wait. Just thought I'd let you know. Okay, we just hit level 6. And you'll notice I'm actually stuck here. I can't equip my Disengage yet, even though I'm now level 6 and should be able to. The reason is because I don't have enough dexterity. I actually need to use the passive point to get this following point, which gives you 10 dexterity. That was a little bit of a mistake. But now Disengage it in, we'll see some of this faster movement. The Grim Tangle is a little bit of a confusing zone. Usually the next floor is somewhere off to the east. There's also the mini-boss here, which drops another support gem, which would be nice, but I've decided to go ahead and skip him unless I happen to run into him. The cemetery has 2 mausoleum events, as well as a special event that gives you a guaranteed ring drop, which is really nice. So they all tend to be somewhat on the outer skirts of the zone, so I typically just go along the outside here. Here's that special event with the ring. I think you have a 50% chance of getting an iron ring here, which is way better than the one I got. But at least I can get a little bit of value from it. Jewelry is very hard to come by this early in the campaign. Right about this moment, I realized that my gear is atrociously bad on the defensive side, and so I wanted to make sure I checked the chest, maybe killed a few higher profile monsters like this rare monster. Normally I don't stop to kill rares unless I have a highly abusive terrain moment, which is not exactly the case here. This ended up being a surprisingly good body armor, though. Getting chased by hordes of monsters may seem a little bit scary with twisters. You got a little bit of a rotation to lock things down, but you can't always cut the rotation short. Just cast something or use Disengage to get around. The lateral movement from Whirling Slash helps as well. Usually it works out alright. Now we're going Ailment Chance, and so the node after this gives you 33% increased damage if there's an elemental ailment on the enemy. With Frost or Frozen Locust Twisters, we're going to have chill on enemies basically all the time. I decided to do the Tomb of the Consort first. I always do this one actually before the other one because of this special event here. Another support gem coming. Actually got a little 2-in-1 rare monster action here, almost biting off more than I can chew, but I mean, just look at this layout here. This terrain is just really juicy for Twister. Lesser Storm Rune's actually pretty big, so that is Flat Lightning. Flat Lightning is the best flat because it also shocks enemies. Later on, we will get it one way or another, but that's pretty early to get that rune. Persistent Support is the next support, and that concludes the support gems for Twister. Persistence is really, really good because it makes the Twisters last longer, so especially if you're good with managing the terrain, you can get a whole lot of extra damage. And yes, this does mean percent increased skill effect duration is a super premium stat for Twisters in general. These Mausoleum zones can be pretty confusing. The Tomb of the Consort always spawns it way on the outside, whereas the Praetor, the other one, spawns it, just kind of hides it right in the middle of the map. I actually made a little bit of a mistake here, forgetting that this boss teleports onto you. I should be standing right on the corner of the map, so she'll teleport to me. On second thought, maybe I will take Disengage, because I'm pretty sure without Disengage I would have got killed right there. So you can see I remembered how to do this boss by standing right there. If she had teleported right onto the spot she's attacking, she would have got absolutely erased by Twisters. Not cooperating though, that's fine. Just take a little bit of extra time to kill her. And that's how Twisters is. I mean, things don't always go your way with the terrain management and everything. At this point here, my gear is honestly pretty lackluster. I'm still missing a shield, a belt, may or may not get any more jewelry. The weapon is kind of middle of the road for where we're at right now. And so for that reason, when I spawned in, I actually got to see the bonus event for this side, which is Forgotten Riches, is a guaranteed rare item. Rare boots is pretty exciting. If only. If only they had movement speed. I did get a shield as a bonus, though. And another rare chest right after that with rare gauntlets. Not likely to be an upgrade because that's just how potent flat damage is. Remember, I already have flat damage on my gloves. Got the next passive points. Another decent sized damage increase there. Always get the Sapphire Charm whenever I can. I don't even remember dropping a belt, but apparently I just got a belt too. So things are starting to come together a little bit. Unfortunately, I'm having to do an awful lot of backtracking here in the Mausoleum of Praetor. It's one of my least favorite zones. I still don't have a good handle, even after a bit of practice. Figuring out exactly where the boss area is, and of course it's basically the very last area that I checked this time. This boss is a bit of an introduction to the final act boss, where he's able to, you know, do a lot of swift attacks and like push you around. He counters Twister pretty hard, actually. I sometimes try to move him into the corner, but he's a boss with a pretty small hitbox and a pretty big arena. Not very many good places to try and trap him with Twister. Just kind of brute force beat him the hard way. There you can see how he kind of shoves me off my own Whirling Slash. Definitely annoying. Twister's absolutely not one of the best skills for this particular fight. If I had a Divine Orb for every time I dropped a rare crossbow, I would never need to farm currency. Alright, so here's another example of using the respawn at checkpoint abusive mechanics, I suppose. Saves a lot of time right here. Now this fight's interesting. This fight is one where I fight him one of two ways. It depends on how much health I have. If I have over 200 HP, I can survive basically every attack that he's putting out, except for one specific slam that's highly telegraphed. And I suppose I'll go ahead and include this in the clip too. I notoriously crash right here, and as the respawn, it's very dangerous because the animations aren't out yet. Everything's got to re-render. That's the particular slam that cannot survive even one hit from. But this is exactly where I want the boss. If I'm going to fight him in an aggressive way and just try to tank him a bit, this is where I'll do it right here. You can see how I got that one twister to hit him like 5 times. This is what I'm talking about. This is that. This is some real good stuff with Twister. But I chickened out and decided to move away because I've died enough time on this boss fight to know what's about to happen. Alright, so that's the boss kill, and yet another pair of rare boots, surely this time. Actually, I recall off the top of my head, still didn't get movement speed from these boots, and I gotta say, given the fact that I checked the vendor pretty reliably, that I ID, I think, every single pair of magic boots, the fact that I still don't have movement speed is pretty rare, and one of the worst things about this particular run. Alright, so here's kind of a special moment. I may not have gotten the movement speed boots, but wow. You can imagine what I thought when I scrolled over that spear. Bit unusual there, and the fact that I can afford it is even more remarkable, although I could have sold a lot of stuff for more gold. A very, very good vendor item. This is, again, reinforcing the idea that you want to check the vendors for potential upgrades. That is a triple flat spear with attack speed, about as good as it gets, although the roll ranges are a bit low. I will outclass this spear by the end of Act 1, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I kept it all the way to the end on this run. Even got some rare gloves that were better. I usually buy flask upgrades around now, though the only really important one here is the life flask. And it apparently dropped one. That's about the halfway point to Act 1. Next up is the Hunting Grounds. There are 5 events here. One of them doesn't matter. Fortunately, the one that doesn't matter is the only one that's in the middle. So this, on absolutely this zone, you just want to scout out the outer edges. We get 2 additional passive skill points. We get another support gem. We have the King of the Mist zone for 30 spirit reward, and then progressing the storyline. This is one of the better boss fights for Twister, for sure. Big hitbox, small arena. You can position the way I'm doing right here to get that side-by-side action on the Twister. Just look at them hitting them over and over and over again. Absolutely abusing the terrain here. Here's the power of those long-lasting Twisters. They just never seem to stop. So we get the 2 passive skill points in the Artificer Orb. Getting this a little bit early, and I already had the rune for it, so whether I had gotten this spear upgrade or not, I would have used it, even on the previous spear. That's a big increase. It's not just flat damage, it's also shock if it didn't already have it, and so that's a big impact this early in the campaign. Okay, you'll see I'm giving myself some intelligence. Why am I doing that? Well, you need at least 10 additional intelligence in order to use Herald of Ice, which is going to be coming up pretty soon. You don't have to go Herald of Ice. I recommend Windward as a possible option too, but I like Herald of Ice now. That's where I'm leaning. Okay, that's the second area I need to find. That progresses the quest line, the Ogham Farmlands. Still got to find the little event for the support gem. And right there, actually, I want to just bring your attention to what I did there. I needed my Twisters to kind of spread out, so I actually cast them straight into the wall so they would bounce off and then arc out further. That was done deliberately, so again, just kind of using or abusing the terrain to my advantage. That checkpoint right there is for the King of the Mist quest line for the Spirit. We'll go back there in a minute. I want that extra support gem first. Not really sure why I stuck around to bother killing these monsters. I guess I felt maybe I was a little bit underleveled, or I'd already done a fair bit of damage to this guy, but typically not a smart idea to kill an invulnerable minion's rare in the campaign if you don't have to. Alright, so this event is a very easy one, and it gives you a guaranteed support gem. Something like the 5th one, I think. And for this, we'll go back to Whirling Slash now that Twister is done, and I'm going to get Rage support. Just kidding, forgot I get Ice Bite instead. Yeah, with Frozen Locust, I think Ice Bite is probably a little bit better for full damage. Rage is still pretty high on the list. You can do either one. You might have wondered a moment ago why I went up to the top there. That is because of this wheel that I'm about to get. This is % increased damage done to blinded enemies. Both Whirling Slash and Twister does blind automatically. So that, I mean, that's basically just the same thing as % increased damage done to monsters, and the number is quite big. So I think early on in the campaign that's definitely worth getting that wheel. I usually spec out of it later on though. Here we got Freythorn. This is probably the hardest zone in the game, at least at level. I tend to not do this one if I'm under-leveled too much. It reminds me a little bit of the Dreadnought in Act 2. The monsters are very fast. They got, like, I don't know if that's chaos damage or what. Tight corridors. Still fortunately good for Twister. The boss is a little bit tough. You actually need to have a bit of defense. Trapped inside the rituals. Bonus support gem. A bit of a rare drop, but we'll make use of it. Again, casting Twisters against the wall. Just a nice way to make sure I hit all the enemies. I've started doing this a little bit more, noticing that the performance of how the Twisters move, where I can anticipate they'll go, has honestly helped improve my practical damage with this build. Later on in the endgame, that doesn't really matter at all. In fact, much later on, we'll have salvo support, and it just basically randomizes the direction of the Twisters, and we'll just cast so many it won't matter anymore. But it's kind of fun to, you know, have that much added control in the campaign when things are a little slower and you got a little bit more time to focus on that sort of thing. Alright, this is the final ritual. I'm still missing one. Another thing that makes this zone hard is it's actually pretty tough to find all of the rituals. You'll see a little bit of a black swirl coming out. Much like in the Trial of Sekhemis Goblet event, you can see where the ritual is, or at least the direction it is. It doesn't really help me much here because it's kind of a linear map. But yeah, I can see it's somewhere this way. Back this way. As you can probably imagine, the King of the Mist arena is pretty unfavorable. Really big. The boss has a very small hitbox. For some reason, he's still pretty easy. I think he's balanced in such a way he just doesn't have very much HP and doesn't actually hit all that hard. So I do the best I can. I just kind of get near him, try to make it so that I get the shotgunning effect on the initial Twisters going out. If I see him moving close to the wall, I'll start using that bit of the terrain against him, if I can. Oh, that was a wicked nasty combo, but I mean, like I said, he just doesn't seem to do all that much damage. I still don't have the most amazing gear, armor-wise, so the fact that that only took me down to about half HP is kind of surprising to me. Alright, here it is. Herald of Ice, rejoice. We're using Spirit now. So, I didn't even realize this until now watching the VOD. I made an absolutely egregious mistake on this run through. First of all, I forgot to equip Ice Bite in Frozen Locust. I crafted that support gem, forgot to put it in. Later on, I realized after the fact, scrambled to put it in, and I put it in Herald of Ice instead, which doesn't do anything, because Herald of Ice can't freeze. We freeze monsters extremely reliably. It might be a little bit less reliable in 0.3, depending on whether or not you're keeping up your quarterstaff, which is going to matter a bit more now than it does right now. It'll matter more in 0.3. But I just figured I would include that in. Absolutely huge mistake on my part, missing a ton of damage. That Ice Bite up normally, it's up 100% of the time on clear, and it's even up a little bit on boss fights. Oh, by the way, here's another tier of spear. We got the hunting spear that I just scrolled over, so that is the next tier to look forward to. However, because the spear that I have is so good, I'll probably skip that tier. We've now done everything we need to do in the hunting grounds. Time to go to the farmlands, and I find the best pathing is to basically just go southeast. Just go straight southeast. Sometimes it allows you to do that, sometimes not. Look for the graphics of the huts like this, and you'll get an extra 2 passive points. Definitely don't want to miss that. with that quest item. Now this is a strong box. If I was in an actual League scenario, I would probably do that, especially that place in the terrain. I could kill that same rare over and over and over again in that little hallway. It'd be all too easy. But this is something of a speedrun, so I decided not to bother with it. Okay, we finally got our last powerful notable. Looks like my bitrate rendering is not very good here right now, so sorry, you'll have to forgive me. But anyway, this is the Ogham Village. We're looking for Renly's tools. They tend to be straight down, but sometimes they're up. It can be really annoying to find these. I remember I had a uniquely good pathing in this zone, this particular run through. And that's the Artificer Orb. You get the rune as a quest reward, and if you hadn't already gotten a socketed weapon, this is where you would get it. The boss fight is always kind of due east from the start location, so that's kind of where I'm going. Alright, now for the Executioner, I've started fighting him up here. I bet you can guess why. Oh look, yet another pair of rare boots. And a rare shield. We finally get it. Hey, we finally did it. Latest movement speed boots ever. I'm sure some of you will disagree, but anyway, we finished this quest and we get our first level 5 skill gem. What are we going to do with that? Well, major power spike to the build comes right here, or at least once I hit level 14, I think, which I'm under leveled. That would be barrage support. This is one of the absolute biggest power spikes for Twister. Another really big power spike will come later, and that will be Combat Frenzy. That comes in Act 2, or maybe Act 3. You'll notice that I picked Strength there. Why did I do that? Well, you need to have at least 5 Strength somewhere, I believe, in order to use Premeditation support on Barrage, which will be the next support gem that we get. Finally got Rage in there, and with the new boots, the new shield, with the great weapon I have, I gotta say, definitely went from a bit subpar on the gear to a fair bit above average at this point. Mana Ramparts is very simple. It's just linear. We'll get a support gem from the Gallows later on. It's basically along on the way. I'm not even sure, but I don't think you can really go the wrong way here. This zone is actually excellent. It's got a lot of density, a lot of monsters to kill. If anything, I like to kill monsters a bit more than normal here in this zone because I want to hit that level 14 mark before the boss, and when I don't do that, I sometimes don't reach that level. So I like to actually farm a little bit of XP in this zone. It's a really good zone for it. One particular way I like to play the build is just run past monsters. When I realize there is enough density there, I will, shoot all the Twisters backwards into them. I know exactly where the monsters are. I know, how strong they are. I know the likelihood of that all those Twisters are actually going to kill them. And shooting them straight down that alleyway like that works really nice. Even got a rare belt. Now that is rare. The only thing I don't have in this run really is jewelry. Hit another level, and we're going for the accuracy wheel. The reason we're doing this is because it's, well, first of all, it doubles as a attack speed wheel, so I mean that elevates it a bit. But the final notable in that wheel gives projectile speed. Now, I had mentioned earlier that skill speed matters a lot for Twisters. I think projectile speed is even better, actually. Projectile speed is a pretty rare stat in the game right now, and my hope, of all the different new notables that we're going to see in 0.3, my hope is that projectile speed makes itself seen a little bit more. That would be great. I'm honestly cringing a little bit watching this footage, seeing a lot of these monsters barely survive, knowing that I'm missing gain as extra 35% cold damage from Ice Bite this entire time. Alright, so we've reached Ogham Manor, and generally speaking, you go west on the first floor, and you go east on the second floor, and then west again on the third floor, and those are the directions you go. There's also a mini-boss to get additional permanent 20 max life, which you definitely want to find. It's on the first floor here. I'm always looking out for this checkpoint. This is where it takes you to the extra event. So it looks like I'm 5.5 bars away from level 14. That would give me Barrage. Usually I'm somewhere around level 14 on this fight, and it's kind of interesting because when I do a level 1 play test, this mini boss is a little bit dangerous when I don't have Barrage, and then he's a complete cakewalk when I do. It really puts it in perspective, the power spike that comes with that gem. Like, he barely has any time to get off any abilities when I already have Barrage. A tier 2 hunting spear. Now, under normal circumstances, that would have made me pretty excited to see that. Not really because it's tier 2, but because it's the magic hunting spear, and that's the next tier of weapon. But again, my weapon's still pretty good for this zone. There it is, level 14. And that brings Barrage online. That was a little bit of a problem here. It said I didn't have the dexterity for it. Whoops. I didn't really realize this until now, but if you don't have a single piece of dexterity on gear, then you don't have enough dexterity for it, which means I'm going to have to spec out of either int or strength. But I believe I had strength on gear. Ah, yes, through an amber amulet, if nothing else. So I'll just switch that strength node over to dex, and then I'll be able to use Barrage. Well, had to take an extra trip back to town. I also had some strength on the belt. Quickly switch that strength passive. There we go. Well, that about wraps it up for this walkthrough video of Whirling Slash Twister Act 1 leveling start. So whether or not that's you and you're planning to do that too in 0.3, or if you're just kind of looking out for something of a narrated walkthrough video on Act 1, I hope you liked the video. Hope it was of use to you. We'll go ahead and let this boss fight play out. I'm not going to cut it short, obviously, but that's basically it for the video. Just wanted to say thank you, and good luck in your league start.
First one's higher. Kneel. Oyana, open the cage. Release the beast. Give me what you promised.
I think not. I expect so much more from you. Since you are too weak to do the job, I'll find someone who can. Goodbye, husband.
You manipulative whore. How dare you abandon me after all I've given you? Desolation.
Not yet.
Solstice of pain.
Patience.
Chilling frost. The air grows colder. Agnar the Ruined.
Not ready.
Agnar the Impaler. As swift as death. And imbued by the moon.
Not yet.
Cursed or gifted. branded and afflicted. Your veins soon chilled. Agna shall slay again.
Not yet.
Allow me to clear your mind, if only for a moment. The madness, it consumed my being. Oriana used it against me.
Where has she taken the beast?
I found messages from the desert.
From the Vastiri?
Yes. Find her. Kill her. But first, please, stop the madness.
As you wish. We must make haste. Let us return to Clearfell to make our preparations.